As a preliminary matter, I am Howard Traster, Zoning Board of Appeals Chairman, and this is a public meeting of the Board of Appeals on the continued hearing for Ron Bullen, 354th Street, and a comprehensive permit for the Village at Cricket Lane. For the Village at Cricket Lane, alternate member Mario Carelli will be seated in place of Elaine Baker, who has recused herself. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Eric Svein.
Here.
Mario Carnavelli.
Here.
Larry Murphy from the Planning Board.
Present.
Okay, John P. Martino, alternate. Not here, so, okay. Elaine Baker.
Yes.
Okay. Doug Janvrin, Fire Chief.
He's still connecting. Maybe move on to the next one.
Okay, Lisa Mead, Town Council.
She's muted.
Yeah, that's okay. I have to unmute them every time, so just hold on.
Yes.
Okay. Gary Hebert from Stanek.
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Paul Colby from the Byfield Water District.
Yes.
And we have Doug Janvrin, Fire Chief.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. Today is Thursday, September 17th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. And this is an open meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. Due to the current state of emergency, in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a public accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the ZBA is convening by telephone conference, video conference via Zoom, as posted on the agenda of the Zoning Board of Appeals section of the town's website, identifying how the public may join in. You may join us by going to https://zoom.us and enter meeting ID 852-7322-8500 and passcode 606726, or by calling 929-205-6099, entering meeting ID 852-7322-8500. If prompted, enter password 606726. Please, excuse me, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video and or telephone conference. Application information has been provided to the ZBA members, materials, applicants, and or their representatives will be present. Information during the meeting. Will present information during the meeting. Permit me to cover some of the ground rules for the effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, Howard Traster, Chairman, or Eric Svein, alternate chairman, will convey the agenda item and or introduce the applicant. As an attendee, we ask that you participate keeping in mind the following. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please use earbuds with tablets or cell phones to eliminate background noise. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that the video participants can see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer when not presenting. Anything that appears on the participant screen will be broadcast and captured by the recording. The chairman will yield the floor applicant and/or their representative, allow them to present their application. If the applicant and/or their representative wish to share their screen, please indicate as such so that you can be given permission to do so. At the completion of the presentation by anyone on the agenda, the chairman may turn to ZBA members for input, comments, etc. at any time. ZBA members may at any time seek input and assistance from town council or peer reviewers. Public comment. The chairman will afford abutters and/or public to comment and ask questions as follows. The ZBA will seek questions through the raised hand function. For video conference participants, you can access this function by clicking on the participants option listed in the menu below the photo gallery. Window will open and display on the right. On the bottom of this participant area, you will see the list of phone participants, and on the bottom, you will see the ability to click on the button to raise hand. If possible, please name or rename yourself so that your name is displayed. When given the floor, confirm your name, provide your address, then your question. Telephone participants can use their phones keypad while in the Zoom meeting to raise hand by hitting *9. I will seek public comment from the raised hand button in the order in which they are listed. Your hand will be lowered when you have been given the floor for your questions. We will continue down the list of those in the raised hand column. If you are unable to locate the raised hand, please physically raise your hand and we will turn to you after you've taken the floor through the raised hand function. Should there be a physical or electronic submittal of questions or concerns that were received by our office, they will be referenced and added to the record. Generally speaking, we anticipate the applicant to present, taking preliminary ZBA comments, allotting time for public comment, establishing a timeline for proceeding, and the anticipated topics expected to be reviewed, discussed within this time.
Dog.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I gotta mute myself. He's gonna,
Okay. No problem, Larry.
an unexpected visitor. Okay, so Eric, you want to read the agenda, please?
Hold on.
Okay, am I good to go, Susan?
Good.
Good. Agenda, public hearings. First public hearing, Ron Bowen, 3 54th Street, continued hearing. The applicant is requesting a finding for relief from section 97-4D of the Newbury zoning bylaws, as the proposed construction will increase the height, the floor area, FAR, and the lot coverage of the structure located on Plum Island Overlay District, BIOD, for the property located on Assessor's Map U04-0-61. And I understand that the applicant is requesting a continuance.
They requested this week and asked to be continued to the October 15th meeting date of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So I will make a motion to continue the hearing.
Do we have a second?
second,
All in favor?
aye.
I have to read, wait, I have to read your names, so I'm sorry. Also, just a technicality, Susan, it should be Elaine, not Mario, on this hearing, I believe.
Yeah,
Yes, no?
yeah.
Yeah, so we need to do this again. Eric, can you make the motion again, please?
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing.
Second.
Okay. Elaine Baker,
Yes.
okay, Eric Svein,
Yes.
Howard Traster, yes, motion passes.
Okay, great.
Agenda, public hearings. Number 2, Cricket Lane LLC, 55R Pearson Drive. The applicant is requesting a comprehensive permit under General Law, Chapter 40B, Section 20-23 to construct the village at Cricket Lane for 24 single-family detached home ownership units on Assessor's Map R20-0-75.
Okay, the applicant is here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are.
Okay. So what we plan on doing is hearing from Stanek Consulting for traffic, then from the fire chief and from Byfield Water. And then we'll go on with any other discussion that is relevant for tonight. So, Mr. Hebert, if you want to start with your presentation.
Okay, we'll do it. Just one question. I'm kind of stuck in pin view. How do I get out of that? You know what I'm talking about? The little scrolling across the screen?
You're gonna have to ask Sue for that.
So
Yes.
So where are you, Gary?
I'm stuck on the pin view, you know, which is like a little view of all the icons across the screen.
Okay.
So you pick the icon that you want to share on your screen. It's showing you a multiple of things that you can share. Pick the one that you want to share to everybody, please.
So I'm trying to pick my own, okay? And then, let's see here. I'm a co-host
And I
now.
just made you a co-host, so you should be able to do that.
Okay, now, unpin video. Right. How do I share this? Well, can everybody see this
No,
presentation?
Gary.
Not yet?
Nope.
No,
You have to click share, Gary.
Okay, and that's, the share is where? Okay, let's see.
Should be at the bottom of your screen. It says share screen,
Here, yeah.
green
Yeah.
arrow.
If I could get out of this pin view, it'd be great, but that's the word. Let's see here.
Can you change your view?
My view is stuck on pin view for some reason or another. I don't know what the
You
deal is.
don't have any way to change it up in the upper corner?
The only way I can think of is maybe if I re-logged in again, would that help? Might try that because it seems to be stuck. Yeah, because I can see all of you across, but I can't see my my presentation. So I think what I'm going to have to do is log off and sign in again. It'll only take a minute or so.
Okay, do you want to
Is that
move
I
on to the
think-
fire
I
chief
think
while he
what
does?
we'll do is, yeah, move on to fire, and then when Gary's ready, we can pick up with him again.
Okay, yeah, let's do that because I don't want to delay everybody on this. Okay,
Okay.
Yep.
see if I can get out of this.
Okay, fire chief, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Good
Okay.
evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation. So Lieutenant Grant, who's my fire prevention lieutenant, and myself did some research over the past couple of weeks with the State Fire Marshal's office. So really all of our fire department access requirements would fall under 527 CMR 1, Chapter 18. However, Massachusetts took all of that stuff out, so we can't really apply any of that to this. However, I have a bunch of concerns which I like to voice. They're not really, they're not code violations, but I just like to voice the concerns. I do think the total length of the project, given from Pearson Drive at the beginning to the end of the project, it's a huge, was it 4,000 feet? It's a huge project for one way in and one way out. So I do have a concern that if something should happen anywhere at the beginning of Pearson Drive, that whole, nobody can get out. So that would be one of my concerns. The dead ends, again, they're within the code, but those little dead ends, we have to stack fire apparatus out into the street with that. So we can't get a ladder truck in. We can get it in, but it'll stack fire apparatus, 2 or 3 apparatus, all we can get in there. Now, there's no way to turn anything around once we get in there. So that's a problem. The only thing I would ask, maybe, I saw on the plan, so I believe the roadway is still 22 feet. Is that correct? Anybody know?
I believe so.
Doug is shaking
Okay.
his head, yeah.
And the dead ends are 20 feet, I believe. The only problem is that 20 feet right out to the end of the road. So if we could widen the dead ends a little bit, so we can swing our fire apparatus in, that would be really helpful. Are they gonna be, so you said you're gonna cement board side the buildings and have sprinkler systems in every building, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, all right. So I really wanted them 20 feet apart. You're saying 15 feet apart, which, you know, if they're gonna be sprinkled, I guess it's not such a big deal, as long as they're gonna be sprinkled. And I saw in one of these replies, there was gonna be solar panels on there. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. We are proposing solar panels on the homes.
Okay, we do have some requirements for those, which you can speak with Curtis Walton, our solar person that does that in the fire department. As we go along, we can get into the requirements about those. Fire hydrants have to be every 500 feet, and I believe they were like every 350 feet, I think. So that's fine. And the circumference of the circle hasn't changed at the end. That's the same as the plan, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So those are pretty much my concerns. I do believe all this falls under the code, because really we have no code to enforce as far as that goes. But I do have some concerns I've voiced, so that's kind of where the fire department's at this time.
Okay, thank you. Eric, do you have any questions for the fire
I
chief?
do. If the fire chief would please expand on 757, sorry, dyslexic, 527 CMR Chapter 18 and why it is not enforceable or recognized by the state.
They're all NFPA. As you know, the state switched to NFPA a few years ago. And they had what they call Massachusetts amendments. So Massachusetts went in and added some stuff, but took some stuff out. I don't know why they took a lot of stuff out, but they've been removed from the code in Massachusetts.
So NFPA, the adopted NFPA code and the Massachusetts amendment specifically removed
That Chapter 18, which covers
Chapter 18.
yeah, which covers the fire department access requirements.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Anything else, Eric?
Just the road width and a comment if the chief would expand on his experience and knowledge of what the 22-foot wide road, multi-directional houses on both sides of the road typically ends up as, whether it's acceptable by code or not, what the experience is for guests parking on the road and if the fire department to show up with a single car parked on one side of the road, or perhaps cars parked on multiple sides of the road for a large party, and what that means for firefighting.
Yeah, that could be a problem anywhere, really. The NFPA code that we could enforce is 20 feet, and they're giving us 22 feet. Our apparatus are almost 10 feet wide. So if there was several cars parked in the street, yeah, it would hamper our operation, but I'm not sure, how wide you'd have to have it where it wouldn't hamper our operation. But it certainly would. If there were several cars in the street, we would have a problem.
It is, has the fire department ever requested or asked for certain conditions of the right-of-way so that the apparatus vehicle and the weight of that vehicle can pass by on the shoulder?
In the past, it's still the 22 feet though. We've requested some hard shoulders to make the whole thing 22 feet. But if they wanted to make it hard shoulders to make it, say, 24 feet, that would be very helpful to us also. So you pull off and use the hydrants a little bit.
Thank you. And one more question, if I may, please,
Yes.
Fire Chief. Are there any conditions in Newbury that currently have the 15 feet separation between dwelling units?
Just, Plum Island obviously is much closer than that. But other than that, I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
No more
Mario-
questions, Howie, thank you.
Thank you.
Mario, get any questions?
No, none at this time, thanks.
Okay, the only thing, Chief, I'd like to ask is, obviously, you're somewhat concerned about parking on the street and getting the fire apparatus through, and maybe more so near the hydrants. Would it be reasonable to ask that there be some no parking zones on the street?
I say, I don't think there would be a problem us getting our apparatus through. It would be a problem if there's a fire at that house to get our ladder truck in and all that stuff. That being said, I think around the hydrants, it would be nice if there was no parking, but obviously there isn't by law anyway.
Right,
But
but
you
maybe
have a
an
little-
extended area.
Yeah, we have a little cordoned off area, marked on the roadway maybe. And maybe extend it out beyond what the code is. We can at least park our apparatus there and pull off to the side a little bit.
Yep.
Be nice.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to the discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would real quickly, just in addressing the chief's comments, and thank you, chief, for your time. As you know, we've been trying to get together with you, and I hope at some point we will get a chance to sit down to go over some specifics with respect to your request, because I do believe for the most part we can meet your requirements. Just quickly, we are certainly understanding of the length of the dead-end road, but there is very little, if anything, we can do about that. And so what we've tried to do is provide additional fire protection in lieu of that in terms of the sprinkler systems in each individual home. So that for us has just been a way of addressing sort of the bigger issues, or at least the big question on the length there, that quite frankly, there's very little we can do about it. We are certainly willing, and we are going to have our engineer take a look to see if we could possibly widen those dead-end streets. Again, while we do meet the town's regulations, we can look at perhaps widening those two dead-end streets. And I believe we have a possibility of being able to do that. So we will analyze that and then provide you with the results of that and show what we can do in terms of widening those streets. We are using the fiber board and the sprinklers as again, to try and address that 20-foot separation issue. I believe the state building code allows for a 5-foot separation with the fire board. So that in conjunction with the sprinklers, we're hoping that our 15 feet is acceptable as you have suggested. We're happy to meet with you to discuss the specifics of the solar panels. I'm not aware personally of the fire code with respect to those, but I can assure you we are required to meet all state building codes, so we will meet all fire regulations on those. You discussed fire hydrants, which we proposed, and again, we'd be happy to make sure that you're happy with the location of those hydrants. And again, we appreciate your time, and I do think, Chief, if we have an opportunity, we'll look at the width of that road and then perhaps talk to you about some of these other specifics so that we make sure we meet your requirements. Thank you.
Great, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chairman, if our engineer could also, Susan, if you could unmute our engineer, he can make a couple of comments to expound. But on our cul-de-sac, we have provided a radius that will meet the fire turning radius required of your truck. And on those dead-end streets, one's about 165 feet long, one's about 180. We have a 4-foot sidewalk so that, although it may not be ideal, it will give fire apparatus additional space.
Okay.
And we will make sure that we have, for the solar panels, we'll meet with you. Sure, I know we need an emergency disconnect and everything so that the first responders are not injured. But Ben, do you want to just expound a little bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to say we did provide a pull-off area for the first hydrant.
Yep.
So the first hydrant has a dedicated pull-off area that will be striped as a fire lane. We do have no parking on one side of the road, so that, you know, there won't be parking on both sides of the roads to provide better access. There are parking areas for an additional 8 cars, you know, in the neighborhood, as well as 2 cars in the garage and 2 cars in each driveway. Each driveway is at least 20 feet long.
Okay.
So there's plenty of off-road parking. No parking on one side of the road, the pull-off of the hydrant. We can provide extra rounding on the entrances to those fire lanes, but it is pretty much in conformance with NFPA. I think it's 1141, which is for rural area fire protection
Yep.
codes. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Sue, do we have anybody in the public that would like to make comments about what we're discussing now? Or do-
None at this point, but you might want to let them know that we're accepting some questions as it relates to this and see if anybody raises their hand.
So anyone that does have a question or a comment, now would be a good time.
Howie, I have a comment, if I might.
Go ahead, Eric.
So the driveway parking is at 20 feet. Ben, what's the average car length that you're assumed to be as a residential car length?
The 95th percentile car length is 19 feet. And I think Kim Hezavarian is our traffic person. I see him nodding in agreement. So the 95% of all the residential cars are 19 feet or less.
All right, so if you're providing a 20-foot driveway, that leaves 6 inches on the front between the road and 6 inches between the driveway garage door. Is that correct?
Correct, and that's to the back of the sidewalk. So we did not obstruct the back of the sidewalk.
True, but even if you pull up and you're tangent with the back of the sidewalk, that only gives someone a foot to walk between their front of their car and their driveway and the
Right,
garage door to get around their car.
right. And
Okay,
again, that's the 95th percentile. I drive an F-150 that's probably 19 feet long. The majority of cars, the 50% percentile is probably less than 15 feet. So,
yes, I think the average is 14.7, but even so, 1'3" is still a fairly tight space between front and back of car for clearance, and that's the point I'm just trying to make.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we don't have any questions from the public, we'll move back to traffic if Gary is ready.
Okay, I'm seeing none, so I will, Gary, make you a co-host.
Okay,
Let me just find you here. Okay,
okay. So let's see, if I can co-host, how do I, let's see. Oh, here we go, share screen.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, I don't see the one that's open just yet. Hold on just a second. See all the ones open except the iPad one. Let's see, hold on just a second. All right, well, I'm going to begin basically without the PowerPoint because I just want to get through this material as quickly as I can, okay, in terms of the things. I have the PowerPoint ready in background if I can somehow manage to get it open. Let's see here. But I will mention that when we did this study, the main things I looked at was the context of the site, the TEP LLC traffic assessment memo, and the comprehensive permit application, as well as the ways to visit the site and look at it in more or less a typical environment. Although in this COVID-19 situation, it wasn't possible to do so. Traffic was not as its normal level, and I did notice a lot more people in the street in the middle of the afternoon than what I would have expected, given it was a normal weekday afternoon, because people were walking around. It was a relatively nice day in April. But as I mentioned, this is approximately 5 months ago when I originally started this study. Also, in addition to looking at the study, I visited the site on April 7th and coordinated with TEP LLC, Kim Hazavardi, who's online, I think, and the site engineer, as far as Newbury Fire Chief, on the questions regarding fire access issues, which are very important to the overall access of the site. I reviewed the town and neighbor comments pertaining to traffic, parking, and site circulation, and prepared and submitted a traffic peer review letter on April 21st, attending a virtual hearing this evening. So these are the things that were done. Now, as far as the site goes, I think the biggest issue that's facing us, and it was initially when I saw it, was the comparison of trip generation to what was assumed in the study, and the issue of the dead-end access and how that was compared to usual conditions. From a traffic projection perspective, the trip generation estimates made by TEP LLC were, I think, very reasonable. They were a little bit on the conservative side, because if you look at the later edition of the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation, those estimates are a little bit on the high side compared to what we would expect in today's reference sources. They expect an average of 283 trips per day, per average weekday on a 24-hour basis. That's approximately about one trip every 5 minutes on a 24-hour basis. And during the peak hours, in the worst case, it was projected around 27 to 29 trips, or one trip every 2 minutes in the peak hours, compared to what's there today. So from a resident's perspective, I think that the expectation should be that there'll be 1 to 2 trips in the peak hour every 1 minute trip every 2 minutes or so during the peak hour. And that's really what's to be expected from this development site. Also looked at the sightline evaluations at 2 locations: the proposed site drive at Pearson Drive and the intersection of Pearson Drive with Orchard Street. I will mention that the intersection of both intersections have adequate sightlines, but that the intersection Orchard Street is really not under the purview of this development, because it is off-site and is not a new intersection created by the development. And based on past 40Bs that I've done, you can't extend out sightline issues beyond the site driveway itself if there's an existing intersection that exists. That said, it does meet the basic sightline requirements, and there have not been any crashes at that intersection in the past several years, according to the data that I have on that. So from a crash perspective, it's not an issue. So let's look at the summary of the dead-end issue. The main concern for me is that the vast majority of Massachusetts communities do not allow dead-ends in excess of 1,000 feet or 20 units, which is basically what's recommended by the Pioneer Institute for Public Policy. That's their guidance on something like this. Most of the communities range from 500 to 1,000 feet, depending on where you are, and that sort, and requiring a certain number of units to be addressed by that. In this case, there is some guidance provided by the NFPA, the National Fire Prevention Agency, which is really that's not an agency. It's a institute, like Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's a group of National Association of Fire Prevention Specialists. In any event, they recommend no more than 100 units be served on a single road. With this development in place, there would be 88 units in total for that entire length of roadway, which goes between Orchard and the end of the driveway. If you add up all the distances, the total distance is around roughly just under 4,000 feet for that distance. It's quite a long stretch. But there is a loop road between there, and there's another loop road between Orchard and a bend in Pearson Drive, which is around 350 feet long. The loop road itself, Pearson Drive Loop Road, is approximately, I believe that ends up being about 2,000 feet or so of that loop itself. But the total end to end from the cul-de-sac to Orchard Drive would be approximately 3,950 feet, according to my estimates. And that's approximately about 1.5 miles from the Byfield on-call fire station, which is not the main station, but it's good to know that that's at least close enough by. Clearly, it is an issue to have a long cul-de-sac. It's not something that I would normally recommend under any circumstances, but recognizing that there is every effort being made to minimize this, there's really nothing from a legislative perspective that stand out and say this can't be done. So the idea is that do the best we can to maintain that continuity in an event of emergency, because clearly when the fire department has to make a call at that end of the street, if they have to go a total of a few thousand feet or so, it's more than 1 mile that they have to go to get their equipment back out to the main street, say a mile in and a mile out in case there's another emergency elsewhere in town. So I think it's an important issue, and it's one that I don't recommend be done very often. In this case, I understand the overriding needs of affordable housing, but again, it's not something I'm extremely happy with from a perspective of traffic. There was some statements made in the comprehensive permit about the public transportation access and the walkability of this site. This site has a very low walkability ratio as far as connectivity to local businesses and recreation is just not available. It's a very long walk, in excess of 20 minutes to get to anything that's other than a recreational walk. Now, as far as recreational walk goes, it does have a good recreational walking environment because sidewalks are being provided, and the street, Pearson Drive itself is a walkable street. There were some questions raised about the how much traffic can a street like Pearson Drive accommodate before it becomes not walkable. In this case, if it's having more than 2,000 vehicles per day, it would be not a walkable street. In this case, I expect somewhere around 800 or so vehicle trips per day with this development added in for the total generation on Pearson Drive. And it compared very favorably with the estimates made in the TEP LLC traffic impact study. So from my perspective, the study done by TEP LLC was a reasonable study for typical traffic operations and traffic safety. I find their findings to be acceptable and reasonable. This is certainly not a high crash area, so I would not expect high safety problems in this area. The trip generation, distribution, and travel forecasts pertaining to vehicle traffic are acceptable and reasonable. The garage spaces plus driveway spaces and the 8 cutouts that were added, I think, on the network indicate there's a possibility of up to 104 spaces all told for both on-street and off-street parking on site. before you would encroach on street. So this is, again, much more than what would be expected on a typical Newbury house, which a typical Newbury house on average has 2.6, as 2 vehicles per household. That's the average for Newbury. And in terms of the typical number of residents for this site, the average Newbury home has 2.6 residents. Now, we're providing 3 to 4 bedrooms in this site, and that may be more homes, but the only thing that you can estimate traffic from clearly is from the number of homes that are being built. If you do it on the base of number of residents and number of vehicles, you're speculating. Now, I did those speculations because I wanted to see how they would be in a worst case situation. For example, I took a look at what would happen if you had a total of, right here, up to 110 residents in the site. Now, by any stretch, I do not expect 110 residents in this site to be the situation. Even though we've got 70 some odd bedrooms, I think you want to keep in mind that's just not, a lot of people have bedrooms that are not necessarily fully occupied, and sometimes they're available for guests or whatnot, kids coming home or whatever. In any event, I looked at 110 residents and found that the trip generation is fairly comparable to what was actually assumed in the traffic assessment. During the weekday peak hour, I estimated around 23 trips total versus 27 in the AM peak hour, and 31 versus 29 in the PM peak hour. So it's very close. The PM was a little higher, AM was a little lower. But in any event, that's based on a speculation for residents. I also looked at it with 60 vehicles in place. 60 vehicles is a lot, high ownership around quite a few vehicles anyways, much more than what you typically would expect for a site like this, and found that the average generation for that would be 30 in the morning peak hour and 41 in the afternoon peak hour. A little more in the afternoon again, a little less in the morning. But still in the range of what was estimated. So I think that the estimates are reasonable and acceptable as far as the what if scenarios go. So with that, I think I want to recap the major findings, okay? First of all, from a fire access perspective, as the chief just noted, 527 CMR is what governs for applicable fire response. And it does not, it no longer provides any guidance on dead-end roads. Don't understand why that is, but it does not provide that guidance. The Pioneer Institute for Public Policy, however, recommends maximum dead end of 1,000 feet serving no more than 20 homes, whichever is less. And again, nearly 99% of Massachusetts communities comply with that standard. This proposed site served by a dead end system just under 4,000 feet, so it's quite long. But it's not unheard of, but it does happen. But again, there's no direct policy on that. And the NFP 1141 that Mr. Osgood mentioned, does say that up to 100 homes may be served by a single access road, and we've got 88 homes in this case. But again, that's not a reference for the length of it. That's just saying that's the maximum on one road. So that is up to really the capabilities of the fire department. If the fire department feels they can adequately service this site with the 88 homes and the 24 at the end, that is their call to make in terms of whether that's reasonable. And I have not seen anything to say that they can't service this site. As far as the backing requirement goes for the fire department, the chief discussed that a little while ago, and I think that the applicants admitted they're willing to work with the chief to resolve those issues. I think that's important to understand. Lastly, the transit availability and reasonable walkability. I don't believe this site has reasonable transit availability, and its regional walkability is just not there. So I would suggest that those assessments in the application are misleading at best. So in any event, I see no reason from a traffic perspective that this site has significant problems. I would love to see connectivity for this site. This is what Massachusetts is pushing right now throughout the state, better connectivity. And this clearly is not a step in the right direction from that perspective. This does not make solid connections because you need loop roads in order to do that. If this had a loop road, I'd be very pleased with it. But again, according to the applicant, there's no possibility whatsoever of creating a loop road for this development onto Pearson Drive. So with that, I'll close and be glad to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Eric, you have questions?
Sure. Gary, thank you for all that. I would appreciate if you could clarify for me when you talked about the number of bedrooms and the total number of vehicles on the dead end. Were you talking about the Pearson Drive plus the development, or
Yes.
just the development?
I was talking for as far as the bedrooms go, I estimated the trips with the development by itself, and then I estimated Pearson Drive as the way it generates today. Basically, what was found from the counts that were taken by TEP is that the existing Pearson Drive generates actually somewhat less trips than what ITE would suggest they would generate. I'm not talking about with the COVID, I'm talking about pre-COVID in 2017, when this was still not even on the radar. But in other words, and this is not unusual for Massachusetts communities actually have less trips than what ITE would suggest. But the projections were made using ITE standard trip generation rates for this development site. So what I'm suggesting is that without this site, there were roughly a total of, and I'll just read this number again so you'll be clear on that without this site, there'd be approximately 600 trips on Pearson Drive, according to ITE rates on a daily basis. And then during the peak hours, roughly 47 in the morning, 63 in the afternoon. They measured back in 2017, 45 in the morning and 38 in the afternoon. So in the morning was just slightly lower and the afternoon was significantly lower than what the ITE rates would suggest for the amount of homes on Pearson Drive with all of its add-ons at the end. There's a little cul-de-sacs here, so I'll include those as well. So with the development, we would expect a total of 831 trips, or 830 trips plus or minus, on a daily basis. So that's as opposed to 600. So 830 versus 600, which is about 37% increase. And 72 trips in total versus 45. That 72 includes all the homes plus the new homes in the morning. And 67 in the afternoon includes those plus the new homes. And I will say that I'm going to forward the presentation to the board so you have it in its entirety. I'm sorry I didn't able to get it up tonight. I would have been much easier, but that's the way things work out. So with that said, the site will add about 37% to the trips that are there today. Right.
Thank you.
Anything else, Eric?
No, thank you.
Mario, any questions?
Yeah, again, thanks again, Gary, for your presentation. Just one question. How many cars did you anticipate that the development would bring in? One per house?
No, not one per house. They would two
Right.
per house.
No. How many?
Two per house, because that's the
Two?
average. That's the average for homes in
For a 3-bedroom home?
for 3-bedroom home. That's the number of cars that is typical for that. That's average. At least according to the latest information I have. And that's what I said. That's what I initially assumed for my estimates. And then I went on a what if crazy. What would happen if you had 60 vehicles in that development, which is quite a few, much more than I would expect. And
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
still
I was just going to mention, I mean, if you had a family of 3,
yes.
the husband, wife both each have a car.
Yep.
And if they had a child, they probably would have a car, attending high school or whatever. So I would think it would be 3. I mean, I have 4 people living in my house. We have 4 cars.
Mhm.
So I would think it'd be a little bit more than that. That's all. Just based on the husband and wife have each a car, and any additional occupant would have a car.
Well, again, it's still higher than the average for the household. The problem I have is that I don't really want to go overstate because since 75% of these are market unit ones, there's no reason for me to believe they're going to be much different than the average for Newbury. And you're right, maybe they do in some cases have more. And I know there's a lot of cases where you have 4 cars and 3 and whatnot. But there are a lot of cases where you only have 5-bedroom house with 2 cars. And I know that happens too. So I think that we just have to base it on the best information that we have and not put them in a situation where we're going to assume the worst case scenario, because you really shouldn't do that. So I'm
And is there enough parking space for 3 cars for each?
3 cars each. I believe that they've got room for 4 cars each. If you
I'm
add-
just asking.
Yes, in terms of the houses, apparently, yeah, they've got room for 4 cars
Okay.
each if they had to. But as I said, you're looking for averages but an ITE rates based on vehicles and based on the actual number of residents is speculative. Whereas we know there's going to be 24 units. That's why I have to base it on the one that and the rest of it is speculative. I just have to go with what I think is a reasonable estimate for that, and base the speculative for residents on the average occupancy of homes in Newbury, which was 2.63. And I think that the vehicles was 2. So that's why I based it on those as my baseline. And if it's expected to be more, that's why I added a little more to do a what if scenario. What if there's more than the average?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sue, can we see if we have any questions or comments from the public?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I am going to unmute Kristen Grubbs. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We
Hi,
can.
Kristen Grubbs, 28 Elm Street in Byfield. I'm struck, Gary, by your comments about the length of the dead-end road being 4 times what most communities have. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, it gets a little complicated, and I'll have to explain how it gets complicated. The reason it gets complicated is because you don't have a strict dead end that's one road. It'd be typical one undivided road from end to end. What it is you have a divided section at the beginning of 350 feet. Then you have about a 1,200 foot space that's really a single road. Then it connects into the loop road, and that loop road is no longer technically, a cul-de-sac per se, because at least in that area you can get around. So if something happens in that area, you've got a way to get around. You get to the site, you've got another 820 feet at the end. So you're adding 820 to 1,020. So I look at it as being an 1,800 foot dead end. It's not really 4,000, but if you define by the way they define dead end roads in the sense of systems, where's the nearest road that you get outlet to? It's from Orchard Street to the end of the thing. And that's where I come up with the 4,000. But I would be hard pressed to say that that's all a dead end road, because there's ways to get around that in terms of, for parts of it anyway. 1,850 feet, you got no choice. You're on that road. If a tree blocks it, you're stuck.
Yeah. So I guess that's my question to the board and for consideration is what the impacts that result from that length of a dead end street are. I mean, if you are a homeowner who buys into this community and you live at the furthest point, you have one access in and out for emergencies, for daily travel. You're passing by every other house without having a loop access to this extension of a dead end. I really think that raises a lot of questions in my mind about the impact on the neighborhood, on those homeowners, on safety. It has an impact on the land that is, the backland, if you will, that is being further developed. I just wonder how much those considerations will be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you ready for another question?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Dan Linden.
Thank you. I'm Dan Linden. I'm a resident at 68 Pearson. I appreciate the presentation there, Gary. So I'm also struck by the comments about how 99% of communities in Massachusetts do not have distances, you said, greater than 2,000 feet or 1,000. I forget what the number was. My concern has always been that the traffic is being added. So similar to the concerns that were just raised, there's no other way to get out of this neighborhood, right? And so this development's being added at the end. And I think it's semantics to say whether this is a cul-de-sac, whether Pearson Drive is a cul-de-sac or not. There's still only one way to get out, which is through Orchard. So when you add a development at the very end of it, now you're turning Pearson Drive into a throughway for that development. So every resident of that development has to go through Pearson Drive to get out anywhere. And so the concern for residents on Pearson Drive is that whether a traffic study says that you need to have a stop sign or a traffic light, or there needs to be a full-blown additional study to understand the impacts, there's no question that there's going to be impacts to the residents that live on the street, that walk the streets, that have kids riding their bikes on the streets, because we're adding an entire community to the end of it, right? And so that's the concern that we have. I don't think there's any other issue regarding this development. I've been a part of it since it started. I've been coming to these meetings. I'm an environmental scientist by training. I'm concerned about other things as well, but the biggest concern is this idea of putting a cul-de-sac onto a cul-de-sac. And that's what has raised the neighborhood against this development, because it just doesn't make sense. Thanks.
Okay, what else do we have?
Right now, nobody.
Okay. Would the applicant like to respond to the report or the public questioning?
Okay, I guess there's a couple of people who are physically raising their hands now. So I'm going to unmute someone named Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Eric Eidreiner, 2 Pearson Drive. I'm sorry I couldn't find the virtual hand. So I appreciate the presentation, and I'd like to ask Gary. So this 37% increase that you referred to from the 600 daily trips now to the 831 approximate daily trips with the site, I recognize that's far from the 2,000 trips a day that you said would make the neighborhood essentially unwalkable. But could you speak about the potential impacts for pedestrian safety and walkability in a neighborhood where a lot of people do walk and kids walk and bike, to have a 37% increase? Because that is quite substantial.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, I'm going to respond to that by saying that, you know, the percentage is a lot because it's a small volume that's there today. I think that's important to understand, because when you are thinking about it in practical terms, okay, think about what happens with this development, and during the peak hour, the worst hour of the day, there's going to be a car every 2 minutes. No more than that. That's the average. I mean, it's going to be once in a while, there'll be one bit, but in over an hour, the peak hour, there'll be a car, less than a car every 2 minutes. Think about how long that is, and think about, you know, how that really, you even get a sense of how much traffic is on a street. I know that when I live on a street, I live on a very short, I live in a not a cul-de-sac, but a loop road. So I know low volume streets and this sort of thing. And I really can't tell you when a volume change of 1 car every 2 minutes. I can't feel it. I feel it if it's 1 car every 5, 10, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I was like, boy, that's getting busy out there. But I really can't feel it as much. My attitude is that the reason why I said 2,000 is because 2,000 is the number they use for saying, okay, you know, you ought to consider possibly doing a sidewalk when it's 2,000. It's not even at 2,000 is unwalkable. It's just that you should think about possibility of doing a sidewalk when you get to be 2,000. I would not expect this will drive that up anywhere near that, not even half that much. So that's again, that's a daily volume. And again, I understand the concern. I saw people walking out there when I was on April 7th. So I know how people like walking around the neighborhood. Even, I mean, it was COVID granted, but it was relatively busy for a midday period, I thought. But again, in terms of livability, I don't think this is going to make it less livable to have that cul-de-sac on the end. Now, my main concern has always been the cul-de-sac on the cul-de-sac. That's been the primary concern right in the beginning.
I appreciate the clarification. I would just comment that as someone who walks around and sees a lot of younger kids biking around, that if a kid goes out for a half-hour bike ride and comes across 15 more cars in that time as a result, I think there is a potential safety impact. So I'd ask the board to consider that, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's another question by a Ted Burke. I'll get to you in a minute, Bart. Hold on here, let me find them. Yeah, I see you. Okay, there you go.
Hi, thanks for the participation. I realize the protocols are met and the standards are met, but we seem to be chafing at the very minimum standards available and forgetting about the life standards of all the children we have, the livability. If this wasn't a 40B, this wouldn't even have got applicant approval for the submission of a plan because of the cul-de-sac on the cul-de-sac. I have a question. I don't know. I think it's for you, Gary, but I'm not sure. What's the snow removal plan on this item? I live at 49 Pearson, by the way, right next to 55. I'm all the way up on the top of the hill. So, but what's the snow removal plan on this paved road, I assume, up to the development? Anybody?
Okay, I think probably that'd be a question for Ben Osgood or someone with the applicant to answer, not Gary.
Okay, am I out of?
No.
Should I wait?
Susan, you.
Take that, Ben?
Yep, I can address that. We actually provide a snow storage areas on our layout plans. You know, essentially you plow a road, the snow plow is going to plow it off to the side of the road. It's going to be a snow bank along the edge of the road. You know, individual homes, you know, may put snow along the edge of their driveway. So we've shown areas, you know, at the end of each home where they can pile snow to plow their driveway and plow these roadways.
So the fire apparatus would have a problem with that? With the snow on the banks getting through?
You broke up a little bit, but I think you were asking if the fire apparatus would have a problem getting through.
Yeah.
The roadways will be maintained by the association and they will be plowed to the width that they are constructed. And there's plenty of area to pile snow off of the roadway to maintain the roadway access widths of 22 feet on the main road and 20 feet on the common driveways.
Okay, thank you. We can discuss the amount of children up there, but I assume there's going to be several 10 or 15 children going to school up there. They're going to be picked up by the school bus, I assume, on Pearson Drive, correct? The bus will not go up the road. So you're going to have children waiting at the bottom and or being brought to the bottom in inclement weather by their parents. There you have 4 to 5 to 10 cars waiting with their children for the bus. That's not included in the traffic study. So that's something I'm concerned with too. Also, you have children being let off, excuse my dog, at the beginning of Pearson Drive by the school bus. And the last time I saw there were about 10 or 15 walking down the street to their homes, as they usually do. So we're looking at these plans and estimations and everything, and we're living real life on the street. And I think, unfortunately, if this goes through, we're going to look back and say we probably shouldn't have done this. Thank you.
Gary, do you take into consideration any of what was just brought up as far as school buses, drop-offs, pickups?
Well, since I didn't do the study, I mean, I did the peer review. Peer review is not the study, I understand that. But as far as school bus operations go, I'm very familiar with those. I've done studied a lot of schools and peer-reviewed schools, actually. So I am familiar with the issue. As far as this particular site goes, I would expect there'll be some walking going down to any school bus stop. If it's located at the end, there's sidewalks provided on one side of the Cricket Lane driveway. And if there's a stop at the bottom of the Cricket Lane, then they would be gathering there for a brief period of time. And that usually is about 5 to 10 minute period, no more than that. But again, that's all part of that. Does get included when you estimate trips in the area. That you assume there's also school-related trips and anything like that that happens in the hour you're looking at. But tend to be you're looking at the AM and PM street peak hours. That's what you're typically looking at for a site like this. And you can also look at site peak hours, but again, usually the street peak hour is the one that's the highest volume of that you're tying into. And that's what we typically look at, is the street peak hour.
Okay.
Does that answer the question? I don't know if it does not. But,
Well, it does somewhat.
okay. Sorry. You know, again, it depends on, you can do all kinds of things. You could put a stop down at the end. You could put a shelter. You know, it depends. Whatever's appropriate for the situation, depending on how many children are up there. 24 homes. Children going to school at any given time with a school bus, that's still a small number, I believe.
And just if I could say, as far as the proposed development is concerned, we have sidewalks so the children can walk down from their house along the sidewalk. You know, and I agree, every parent now is a helicopter parent and they're going to drive their kid down. They park at the end of the road. The kid sits in the car, bus comes along, they get in the car. That, you know, the kid who is parented well walks down the sidewalk. The others get driven there. So, but it's they, as Gary said, they sit there for a few minutes. They're in their car. They talk. The kids get on the bus. The mothers all turn around, or the fathers, and they drive back to their home.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, got a couple more questions, Howie, if we can entertain those.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to unmute Bart Bracken.
Hi, thank you. First, I'd just like to mention that there is no hand-raising function that I can find on this. So if you're expecting people to raise their hand, they can't.
Well, there were instructions provided at the very beginning of the meeting. So in lieu of that, you can always do exactly what you did, which was raise your hand and we will get to you.
Okay, I'll go look for instructions, but I live on Zoom all day long and there's no hand here. Gary, you had mentioned at the end that you felt that there was some misrepresentation in the application about the that information that was presented, which is something that we've raised a number of times. I mean, as you know, if you're not going to be honest in your application, are you really going to be honest in your development? And I think they were talking about some public access to public transportation, which we know really was not true. I think they mentioned that there was sidewalks and a few other things. So what's the implication of that? You sort of said it at the end. You said it in some way of concern, but I did not get a sense of what you were really trying to say about that particular issue.
Okay. You know, from my perspective, the reason for putting that in the applications is I think the Commonwealth would like to have affordable communities in locations that are well served by walking and public transportation. And this, unfortunately, is not one of those locations. And that's why I think it should maybe, it's called so-called smart growth. The idea that you locate places where people can walk to things that they don't have to get in their car all the time to do things. But unfortunately, this is not one of those locations, except for, as I said, recreational walking. There's places it's safe to recreationally walk around there, but not from walking to a destination or walking to public transportation. And I think it's important to when you're filling out these applications, to be aware that someone might look at that and say, hey, you know, that doesn't make any sense to me. that this is, you have to really justify that. And I guess if I'm from the state's perspective, this is not a smart growth area. It's an area that you can build stuff in, but it's not from a walkability perspective and from a public transportation access perspective. This is not a great area to develop in from that perspective. That's all I'm saying. You know, I can't really, beyond that, I don't know how this affects this application. I don't know if it affects it very much, but I just think it's somewhat misleading to say that it's available to that sort of thing.
Okay, Brad Smith has raised his hand. I'm going to unmute him. Okay, go ahead, Brad.
Hey, thank you. Bradford Smith, 6 Pearson Drive. I need to comment about lifestyle and the numbers. Gary, I appreciate all the numbers that you came up with and the facts and figures. And when you stated that during peak hours, there'll be 1 or 2 car trips every 2 minutes, as a neighborhood that uses the street as a playground, 1 or 2 trips every 2 minutes is a significant safety concern. There's basketball hoops on the street, there's hopscotch on the street, kids are riding bikes all over the street. That's a huge impact on the current lifestyle of the neighborhood and of the kids. Well, I had 2 sons that grew up in the neighborhood, and playing in the street was never an issue. And kids their balls were rolling across the streets all over the place. Power Rangers were chasing each other from one house to the other. And during peak hours, which is after school, and you're now having 1 or 2 cars every 2 minutes, as a child playing this neighborhood, that's a huge safety concern. And that's, I think Dan and Eric both touched on that. That's one of the major issues, or the major issue of this neighborhood, is that the lifestyle is going to be considerably impacted with this development, and the safety of the children playing in the street, I think, is a bigger impact than just people walking. And I agree with Gary that, 1 or 2 cars, if I have to wait 1 or 2 minutes to back my car out of my driveway, yeah, that's not an issue. But it certainly is if I'm a 10-year-old playing hoop and I have a big time game going. So it's just a lifestyle is significantly impacted. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have, Doug DeShanes, did you have something to say? Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to address this repeated suggestion or allegation that my clients have misrepresented information presented in their application. With respect to walkability and distances, we provided the actual distances from the proposed development to various town buildings and town amenities, and also the distance to reach public transportation. Those numbers are in our application and they are factually true. A determination of whether a 5-minute walk or a 20-minute walk is walkable is a matter of opinion. The state has concluded that the distances that we have provided are in fact acceptable in terms of walking. We may have differing opinions on whether a 10-minute walk to something is reasonable or not. But the statement that we have misrepresented facts, it is our opinion that it is walkable, and it's based on the specific distances to those amenities. There's no representation whatsoever, and I would ask the chair to qualify these statements with respect to misrepresentations. I also don't think Mr. Hebert said we misrepresented information. I think, again, Mr. Hebert is suggesting that he doesn't agree that the distances from our project to the various town amenities would be what he would consider walkable. But again, there has been no misrepresentation of facts.
Douglas? Hi, this is Mario Carnevale. I have a letter here from September 14th. And some of the things that you guys did mention was that we were interested in how this project will support local business, use locally harvested wood or agricultural products, use or reuse locally recycled materials. All boxes were checked by you guys, but no explanation.
I'm sorry. What was this question concerning?
Just the fact that there was no misrepresentation. I'm looking at a letter from the PI River Partnership when they had looked at your application. And in your application, the boxes you checked were the project would support local businesses, use locally harvested wood or agricultural products, use or reuse locally recycled materials, all boxes which were checked by the developer but were not explained.
Well, I don't know if there's an explanation necessary. The question is, what kinds of things would we do to support local businesses? And those are examples of the kind of things we can do.
Locally harvested wood, agricultural products, reuse locally recyclable materials.
Yeah, if they're available, we're going to buy our materials locally. Why wouldn't we?
I don't know. Did you plan on it?
Yes.
So if I could say that, we have to install erosion control, staked hay bales, backed by silt fence. Hay bales are harvested all over Newbury, by Newbury harvested hay, locally recycled materials. Essentially we go in there, we take the timber, we grind it up, we use it as part of our erosion control. We take the stones and the rocks we built, we dig up, and you grind it up and you use that as your road base. Those are all under LEED certification, are acceptable recycle methods. Using your local materials that are recycled on site, in the site, reduces truck trips, recycles those materials. So there's definitely a lot of backup for that. We didn't get into specifics in the application, but there is backup for that.
And I think that's what a concern was, that there was no explanation on some of these things. That's all.
Okay, can we take a couple of more questions, Mr. Chairman? Okay, Mr. Burke. Got to unmute yourself. There you go.
There you go. Not touching on any misrepresentation, but as far as the recreational facilities in the area you indicated, would that include the firing range?
I would suspect there are people that would suggest that that is a recreational activity, yes.
Oh, good. Is that going to be part of the walking down the road? Because I've had hunters come on my property who were lost, and I heard shots going around. So I just wanted to make sure we consider that part of the recreational area. That's all.
Okay, so next.
Yeah, hold on. Mr. Linden?
Thanks, Dan Linden, 68 Pearson. Regarding the misrepresentation, I think the point is not about the distance to these amenities, but it's about things like, for instance, Central Street is not a walkable street. Anyone that lives in this neighborhood, lives in the town, knows that Central has a very small breakdown lane. If you're walking on Central, you're watching your back all the time, right? Or I guess you'd be walking into traffic to be safe. But that's not a walkable road, and that's the road you need to take to get to any amenities, whether it's Rusty Can, which has great barbecue, right, or across the freeway to the library or the post office or any of the Main Street convenience stores. So, and when I looked at the distances that were reported and talked to some other residents, they seem to be crow-flying distances, not walking distances from the, we've already talked about how long the cul-de-sac at the end of the cul-de-sac is. So to get out and around to these amenities, that's the point about misrepresentation, is that when someone reads that, they're thinking, oh, this is going to be a great location for a community that can access all of these things. And the fact is that that's not true. And again, it's a small part of this, so it's not, I'm not saying this is a deal breaker, but it's disappointing. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Kristen Grubbs. Gonna unmute her.
Hi, again, just to also, 28 Elm Street, this is not my backyard. This is not a neighborhood I know other than riding a bike and being a resident and being a former planning board member in this town. And I would just like to, I object to the suggestion by Mr. Deshane that these are considerations that are subjective. The Commonwealth sets forth 10 sustainable development principles that are objectively considered by Mass Housing, and they should be considered by the permitting boards of this town. These are, we can all have subjective opinions about it, and for those residents who live in the neighborhood, they are the best voices for those opinions. However, there are objective criteria by which things like safety, distance, sustainable, smart development are considered. And there are multiple instances, and I would refer the board to comment letters from the Parker Ipswich Essex Rivers Partnership, which is my former employer, that lay out how this particular proposal does not meet those sustainable development principles. And I just, those are objective things that can be considered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're good for the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I
Okay.
think does the applicant want to respond to anything else before we move on to water?
No, Mr. Chairman, we'll move on to water.
All right. One other person has raised their hand, so if you'd like to take that, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
we'll take one more for now, and then I
Okay.
think we'll have to wait till the end of the meeting.
Okay, someone named Steven, I'm going to unmute you. If you can. There you go. No, come on. You have to unmute yourself, Steven. There we go.
Okay. This is going to be very quick, and I'm listening to the discussion about the walkability, and I'd like to ask one of the applicants. I've been on Pearson Drive, number 7, Stephen Godzik, for over 40 years. Now, if I lived on Cricket Lane, what public transportation am I walking to? If someone can tell me that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. DeShanes?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to refer to my notes here so that I can get the specific distances. If I could have just a moment.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, without knowing the specific number as I look, I will tell you that we did measure the distance from the proposed project to the nearest public transportation access point, and that is what we have provided in our application, and I am looking for that specific number now. I'm sorry.
You know offhand what public transportation spot you referenced?
Mr. Chairman, I've got to look at my notes. I can't be guessing, or I'll be.
Okay.
There is none.
Understandable.
There is none.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask for the time to provide a written response to the question. I'm thumbing through my application here, and I just as soon like to do it correctly and get the exact number.
All right, that's fine. So we'll expect a response at the next meeting.
All right, I'll give you a written response.
Okay, Stephen, we'll be meeting next month and we'll have a response for you at that time.
In 40 years, I haven't seen any public transportation, so maybe it'll appear.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
we're giving you till next month.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to Byfield Water now.
Okay.
So, Mr. Colby, when you're ready.
Yeah. All right. So I think on Monday we received an updated set of plans, utility plans, which we have reviewed, and other than a couple of minor comments, they look fine. So I don't see any big deal. Maybe the only issue, while the fire chief is on here, is that the location of the last fire hydrant at the very end of the cul-de-sac in the circle is not on the end of the water main, and we're going to propose that it be moved to the end of the water main so that when we flush, we can get all debris from the pipe. So that's one of our comments, and I think that's the only one that's pertinent. When the plans are complete and we have a final set, they'll need to be voted on by the water board itself. Let's see, on September 11th, we did a flow test in the area, and it shows that there's plenty of water available for the project, so we don't have an issue that way. And as far as supply, we think we're all set, so we'd welcome the customers. We don't see a problem.
Okay, so comments that we've received from abutters or interested citizens don't seem to agree with you, and I just like to know why there's a disconnect with people saying they have trouble with pressure and volume, and
Well, we have the flow test rate. I have the flow test rate in front of me.
Right.
We had a flow of over 1,000 gallons. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
you know, I'm not questioning, but why do you think there is a disconnect in people's opinion of water pressure and volume?
I have no idea. There's plenty of pressure and plenty of volume on the street. It's either in their house or they're perhaps against the project. I don't know. I'm not arguing either way. I'm just telling you what we saw when we did the flow test.
No, I understand. Eric, you have anything?
Yeah, what was the date of the, Mr. Colby, thank you. What was the date of the flow test, please?
September 11th this year.
Okay. And what was the volume again?
Okay, well, we had a static pressure of 80 psi, which is very good. And during the flow test, we had a residual pressure of 60 psi, so only a 20-pound pressure drop with over 1,050 gallons per minute, which is extremely good.
Thank you.
Mr. Colby, are you willing to share that flow test as part of the record?
Sure, no problem. I'll fax it over to your office tomorrow.
Okay, or you can just email it to me if you don't mind.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mario, do you have any questions for Mr. Colby?
I do, Mr. Colby. Just we've received a few memos from the Parker River Clean Water Association, and one from the.
I saw the letter.
Okay, and so in that letter, they mentioned that the Commonwealth has determined the Parker River to be one of the most highly stressed basins in the state, according to the Mass Resource Commission. And then for your engineers, Weston Sampson, during a site examination of the Larkin Road well field, cited that additional supply, stating recent reports document the inability of current wells utilized by the district to meet seasonal high demands in the summer months. And it goes on to say that Byfield Water Department is currently seeking a 15% increase in the water withdrawal permit, but new standards will require the Byfield Water Department to develop mitigation offset plans to address the additional withdrawal.
Okay, and so the Weston and Sampson were engineer for us, so that was in 2015. We were exploring for water, so that's where they made that claim. And then last June, so June of 2019, we actually brought on a new public water supply for an additional, which is approved in an additional 160,000 gallons per day. So our supply is adequate now. And then on the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then on the, I don't know where he got the information of a 15% increase in our water withdrawal permit, because we're not seeking that. I have no idea where they got that from. So we have not tried to get that, and we're not seeking it today. We'll be renewing our permit at the end of 2021, and we won't be seeking any additional increase.
Okay.
So that I don't know where you got that from. That's completely incorrect.
So his letter is misleading? The letter here is misleading?
That one statement is, the one that we needed more supply was true in 2015, but not today.
Okay.
And then the increase in water withdrawal permit is not true. I've been here since 2001. We have not tried to increase it since 2001.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
That's all.
Okay,
Eric? Did you have a question, Eric?
My question can wait. It was for the previous. We can wait. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any public questions, comments? So,
Kristen has raised her hand. I'm going to ask to unmute her.
Hi, I was interested to hear if the applicant has estimated the amount of water the development will use in light of some of the comments that have already been made about the fact that the Parker River Basin is a stressed basin. And I'm glad to hear that the Byfield Water District won't be asking for additional supply in order to support this development or any other uses. That's great news because, you know, the watershed of the Parker River is very stressed and can't really support that. So back to this project, I'm curious what the estimate of water use is. I also am not familiar and curious whether the landscaping and any irrigation requirements have been proposed. In particular, I would support no additional wells being drilled, whether even for private irrigation use. I'm curious what the status of that is.
okay, I'm guessing maybe Ben, you'd be a good one to answer this.
Yeah, under Title V, the septic system is designed for 110 gallons per bedroom per day. Our septic system permit application is for 7,900 gallons per day. I would expect the water usage, although that's a Title V designs are high, I would expect the water usage to probably be 4,000 to 4,500 gallons a day for domestic water.
Kristen, will you answer your question? Well, I have a question, Ben, while we're talking about it. What conservation measures regarding water is the project proposing?
Actually, Walter can probably speak better to that than I can. I mean, they use water saving fixtures, but I know he understands the homes he's building. So if you could unmute Walter, I think he can answer that.
Hi. Yes, we do very energy efficient homes. Besides being energy efficient from a heating and a cooling perspective, we use low flush toilets, low flow shower heads, low flow faucets. as energy-wise, we expect a HERS rating of about 40, which will be very energy efficient home. And as we said before, we'll be having solar panels on every one of the houses, though we don't know how much yet, how many solar panels will be on each house, but the whole development will be very energy efficient. We try to be very conservative in that regard.
Okay, more specifically to water usage, are there going to be irrigation systems? And if they are, where's the water coming from?
We're looking at it. We may drill an artesian well for an irrigation system that will be shared by the whole community.
Okay, so nothing's been decided on that yet.
We haven't.
No. Okay. And any way of reclaiming any water other than your safe low flow?
Well, our leaching system will recycle that water and put it back into the groundwater. And stormwater management systems, we have a 4-bay system and retention areas that pre-treat the stormwater runoff from the roof drains. It's all collected. And Ben, maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Right. Stormwater Management Act has requirements for infiltration based on soil types, and we exceed what is required. I think in a typical storm, we infiltrate 4,200 cubic feet of water, which is probably about 28,000 gallons of water gets infiltrated into the ground in a typical storm event. There are individual infiltration systems as well as a large infiltration system under the cul-de-sac. And Walt is correct, any water used, consumption, potable water in the home, that will be infiltrated into the groundwater through the septic system.
Thank you. Okay, Susan, do we have anybody with any other questions?
I just wanted to give people a minute, but I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Maybe we go back to Eric. I maybe cut him off on a question earlier.
Yeah, I was going to go back, Hallie, before you wanted to move on, but the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has a municipal resource guideline for walkability that was published in July 2018, and it's on the webpage, and it basically lists some guidelines and requirements for pedestrians, and basically the resources state that short trips, and it doesn't really define short trips, but it really defines the short trips if people feel safe. And so how do people feel safe in terms of Orchard Street does not have a sidewalk. Central Street does not have a sidewalk until you get to Fruit Street. And then once you get to Fruit Street, there is a sidewalk up and over 95. And I'm pretty sure that sidewalk extends to Main Street, but I'm not 100% sure. So I think I was just trying to comment on the idea of walkability and people's perception of safety on roads, and wanted to bring that up as part of the discussion of what was represented as a walkable community.
Okay.
Martha, did you have a question?
It wasn't a question. It was just going back to the discussion about public transportation. If I recall correctly, both the site approval application and the comprehensive permit application both referenced the Ring and Ride program as being the public transportation that was available, immediately available to the neighborhood. So that's not a regular bus line. That's a call, call system. If somebody wants a ride, they pay $2 for it or something, but there is no bus line or anything that's near the site. It was just the Ring and Ride that was mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Martha. Okay, so anybody else?
Does not look like that's, yeah, looks like we're okay at the moment.
Okay. Eric, do you have anything else you want to discuss tonight?
In closing, yes, if I could bring up a few comments, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
One would be last week, I had a list of about 9 or 10 things, and I think following up on that was asking if you had covenants or homeowners association requirements, if those are in development, and when we might see those or understand those. 2, I was asking for a list of all waivers. I'm not sure if that's in the application, but would ask for a list of waivers that you're asking for knowingly in lieu of town bylaws. Let's see. Have you identified which units are affordable? And if there's any understanding that as you build out and complete and provide sales and develop the development, is it developed all at once? Is there a plan of sequence? Do we have that for an understanding that all the roads and infrastructure going first and then the housing lot starts second? Or are you building on a sales basis? And how, then again, how are the affordable units allocated? I see in your plans and renderings that all the units are singular plans. It would be nice if you actually did a rendering that showed the streetscape and several houses or several streets or some of the dead ends and the multiple houses together. That's all I have at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mario, you have anything to finish up tonight?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, so I think we should talk about what we'll focus on the next meeting. I would suggest probably environmental, since we haven't brought that up yet. Can you make that possible, Sue?
Yeah, I did want to just mention, Mr. Chairman, that there were those letters from Pie Rivers Partnership that we did receive on September 14th.
Could you read
as
those
well.
record for us?
I can. They were added to the website for the record for any abutters or anybody else that would like to read them. I can read them now. Fairly lengthy, so it'll take a little bit of time. These letters were provided to the board as well as the applicant, as well as Mr. Colby. So he was aware from a Byfield Water District perspective. So whatever your pleasure is, I'm happy to do it.
Well, maybe if it is available on the website, unless anybody requests it by raising their hand, maybe people can look at it on the website. Unless Eric or Mario think we need to read it.
Could you just read the first introduction paragraph of the letter so we understand who it's from and what their first essence is of the letter, please?
Certainly. So from Pie Rivers Partnership, the first paragraph is, thank you for accepting these updated comments on Cricket Lane LLC's proposed Byfield Estates development at 55 Rear Pearson Drive, Newbury, Mass. The Ipswich River Watershed Association convenes with a regional partnership of municipalities and nonprofit organizations called the Parker Ipswich Essex Rivers Restoration Partnership, formed to support communities in protecting our region's natural resources. The partnership often reviews and comments on land use projects in the region, and we respectfully submit these comments to this particular project. I'll just read the title: Threat to Parker River and Water Supply, Wetlands and Protected Areas, Low Impact Development, and highlighting the need for net zero water neutral planning. So those were the areas that they had comments about. This is on the website in the zoning board of appeals section that people can feel free to refer to. The second letter that we received was from Parker River Clean Water Association. It was dated September 10th. The Parker River Clean Water Association would like to reiterate our concern for the 24-unit development being proposed off Pearson Drive. The Byfield Water District's description of the water supply being adequate at this time does not prevent the zoning board from imposing reasonable conditions to offset the impact of water use for the site. Indeed, the word adequate would not relieve one's anxiety if this was the description of child safety seats in a car you are considering buying. And then it goes on to talk about the Weston and Sampson comments, which I think we've covered here. The 15% increase, I think Mr. Colby also addressed. And then there's some reference to Mass DEP developing a demand management toolkit for water supplies and encouraging the board to promote and condition water conservation for all multi-housing development proposals. And again, this is also on the website if people would like to review it.
Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, I believe.
If I could ask a question, if you don't.
yeah, go ahead, Sue, and then we'll get to you, Ben.
Okay. I was just going to ask, I think in the last meeting, there was reference to the fact that the intent was to file with Conservation and the Board of Health with regard to this project. I just wanted to check on the status of that because I haven't seen anything come through.
So first of all, Mr. Chairman, I know Attorney Duchesne would like to chime in. He's muted right now. But we have filed with the Board of Health. I checked with them last week. They haven't finished their review. And the Conservation Commission filing is pending. We were delayed a little bit because our wetland consultant, Mary Rimmer, is now a member of your Conservation Commission. So we've employed a new wetland consultant to assist with the filing. And that will be, everything is prepared. It'll be probably within the next week or two. And I know Mr. Duchesne wants to talk about what to discuss at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for unmuting me. I just wanted to just briefly address Mr. Vaughn's comments and let him know that, yes, our requested waivers are in our application. You do have them. They have not been modified or changed since then. I will provide you a development staging program and explain how the affordables are done. Typically, you must provide one affordable as you build 4 units. So if you build 4 units, one of them has to be affordable so that the affordable units are built and made available proportional to the market rate units. So it's a 25%. I will get you the draft covenants and the homeowners association documents within a week. I will check into how quickly we can get you the requested plans with respect to the landscaping plans. I do not believe we have currently identified which of the units will be affordable, but I can tell you that Mass Housing will require that they be interdispersed among the units so that they're not identifiable. And I will, but I do also believe that Mass Housing will have a say in that. So we will find out whether we can identify those and whether Mass Housing will approve them, and then we can provide it to you. And again, I'll get back to you on how quickly we can get you some renderings with respect to streetscapes and homes. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the next meeting, I certainly would agree. We would love to discuss environmental issues, especially where we will be filing with conservation soon. However, It's my understanding that our information has been in the hands of your environmental peer reviewer since July, and we have yet to hear anything back. So perhaps you could suggest to the peer reviewer that they get us some comments, certainly prior to the next meeting, so we can be prepared to discuss them with the board at that time. Also, I do agree that we should discuss engineering at the next meeting. I understand that the final review letter from your peer reviewer is due any day. It's been about 4 weeks since we submitted our last revisions. And Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're expecting that letter sometime soon, so that we would all have it well in advance of the next meeting. So in addition to providing the written response to the question that was asked earlier regarding the sustainability principles, the information that Mr. Vaughn has suggested or has requested, which we will provide, those could be topics of discussions in addition to the environmental and the engineering, provided we get some feedback from the peer reviewers. And of course, we're willing to discuss anything else you'd like to discuss.
Right, okay. Go ahead, Sue.
So I was just going to say, I believe that Mr. Osgood was made aware, but our peer reviewer for environmental had a immediate family wedding that was going on during the last month meeting that we had, and those are currently being reviewed and prepared and will be sent over to you and us as soon as those are available. I do expect those probably within a week. And they have certainly been given the heads up that they are more than likely going to be asked to participate in the next meeting that we have. So I think that they will be ready to do that and participate.
Okay, so why don't we try to set a date, Sue, and we'll put what's been discussed on the agenda, and if Eric or Mario want to add anything else to it, they're free to give us suggestions.
Well, I can tell you that our regular ZBA meeting is on the 15th, so I would suggest perhaps the 22nd.
Okay. Does anybody have a conflict with the 22nd of October?
I'm good.
Good. I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Doug, Ben, does that work for you?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, so October 22nd it is.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for your time.
Okay.
Are you going to do a motion to continue to a date and time certain, please?
We could.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearings to October 22nd, 2020.
We have a
Second the motion.
Okay, Eric, you, yes or no?
Yes.
Mario, yes or no?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so the motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
You.
Okay.
Thanks,
so
everybody.
Yeah. So we need to make a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make a motion to close tonight's meeting.
Second? Still with us, Mario?
It looks like he dropped off.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
wait a
I'll
minute.
second. I guess I
He's
can
there.
second.
I see he's still connected, but
You can get a second from Elaine for tonight's meeting as a meeting.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Elaine, yes or no?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
I vote yes. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.